Hi, I promised a quick janky video on smooth skin binding. So I don't know, I feel like I've done videos on this before. I'm not going to go like super crazy in depth, but basically what I've done is I've sort of, you can see, I have on this particular robot, this sort of piece up here is supposed to be a solid piece, this piece down here is supposed to be a solid piece, and then this is supposed to be like a weird bendy spine. So what I've done is I've gone through and I've set up the joints in this character, so I have the root down here and the pelvis, and then pretty much just like one joint up here. You can see it's kind of, it's not like the best, but it's pretty much just like where that meets the upper part of the body. And then this would just be, you know, a neck joint to go somewhere up here. I would orient that better if I was rigging this for realsies. One thing I also want to bring up is the UVs on this are really, really janky because I just sort of extruded some stuff. So I'm just going to apply a really quick automatic map to this. Again, I do not recommend automatic maps. There is now a crap ton of seams in this, which is not ideal. But I do want to show you a quickie thing for exporting weights. So I'm going to just do this because it's going to make that process not broken. I'll come back to that later. So basically what we want to do, I'm just going to move this joint down a little bit, is if you're doing a bendy spine, you need sort of two things for that to work. One is joints to actually use and bend your spine. So you can see I have basically one joint. So anywhere you need it to bend, you need joints to sort of control that. So I have one joint up here, one joint at the very base of this little stick thing, and then just two joints in the middle, so I have like a little bit of control. I can kind of flop things around. It doesn't really matter how many joints you have in here. I am usually a fan of like fewer joints than more, so the most I'd probably do for something like this is 2, maybe 3. Honestly, you could even get away with 1. But what you want to do is, there's actually sort of two different schools of thought on how you can bind this. I'll just show you both really quick, but basically, select your chest, select the root joint, or pretty much any skeleton in the chain you want to attach it to, go to skin, bind skin, and use joint hierarchy. I also usually just set the max influences to 3 and turn off maintain max influences. I'm not super gonna go over these. It's basically how many joints affects a particular vertex. The default in Maya I think is 5, which I think is gross and unmanageable. Usually I do 3 for this and it works totally fine. But basically joint hierarchy is going to attach the skin to any joint that is physically connected to the one you selected. So if I selected the root joint, it's going to select bind the skin also to these little leggy joints, the spine joints, all of this stuff. The other option that you can do, like this is honestly, if I'm doing like a human character where the whole skin is one piece, that's usually what I'll go with. In this case, I know I don't need a lot of extra joints, so I'm going to go through and just sort of grab only the joints that I want to connect this to. In this case, pretty much the spine, and I'm going to do the neck for demonstration purposes, even though I don't actually want that. Grab your skin and set this to selected joints. If you select more than one joints, you also, can still play with your max influences. If you select only a single joint, it's just going to bind that directly to your mesh, and the mesh will follow that. It's the only thing there, so this doesn't really matter. I'm going to go ahead and do bind skin, and you'll notice that now when I bend this, we have a goofy wiggly skeleton. Obviously it's not bending entirely in the way that we want, so what I'm going to do, and for the record, I do not in the slightest recommend keyframing your joints. I'm only doing this for demonstration purposes. Keyframing joints is terrible, 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 terrible practice for actual rigging, and you never want to do it while you're animating. It will make you cry. Or also maybe break your skin. That's exciting. What have I done here? Alright, so for... Great, great. So this is usually the part where Maya just sort of like craps out really hard. And I'm going to not save this and then open up another version of Maya on my very, very sad computer. So I'm just gonna leave this here. It might take like a minute, for which I do apologize. Maya's just gone into the weird glitchy thing where it's just like, hey, what if I just delete your entire skin? Like that's what you want, right? And I'm like, nah, that's not what anybody wants. Oh great, it's opening a second version of Maya. That's gonna make it better. Wah! Boop. When Maya refuses, whoa, what is all this crap I have pulled up? What? Okay. Give me a minute. Sorry, guys. But basically what you want to do to sort of control the, please work, to control the bend of that skeleton is going to be what's called weight painting. And there's sort of two different ways that I usually go about doing that. So I'll just briefly go through those. Hopefully this doesn't break. Don't break, don't break, don't break. It's probably broken. And this is why you shouldn't key your joints. Alright, close enough. Don't know why that happened. So actually, I'm actually going to bind these. I would like these to follow the top of the body. I figure kind of what the heck. So I'm just going to go into my rigging menu, skin, bind skin. And this one, I only want this neck attached to this joint. So I'm going to do selected joints and hit apply and grab both of these and attach these into the chest. So now when I jiggle this back and forth, at least the upper body is going with it. So painting skin weights. What you want to do is, I mean, it usually helps to sort of label your joints. Spine 2, I'll do this like really, really fast. Spine 3, chest. Alright, neck. Alright, so what I'm going to do, I'll just hide these temporarily. Two different ways to paint skin weights. One is to right click on the model and go to paint skin weights tool. It's going to bring up, usually by default, it looks something like this. What this is effectively a list of joints affecting this model. And if you click through them, you'll see that it's sort of like shading the model differently. Basically what that is just Maya sort of telling you where this joint is influencing with this little map, or this sort of color gradient. So what I usually do, first and foremost, is turn on color ramp. I find it gives you a lot more information. So white is the most influence, black is no influence. And if you look, up here, in the black and white version, this looks black, but if you click on color ramp, you can see that it actually has a very, very low level of influence on it. So in this case, black is still, pure black is no influence, white is solid influence, and this blue is just like very, very low influence. So if I cared, again, I would usually sort of turn on that color ramp. And if you actually wanted to modify these versions, so in this case, like the neck up here, which is really only supposed to be controlling this joint, is modifying the torso, which isn't really something that I'm looking for in this particular model. So what I'm going to do is, first of all, set my brush radius larger. And I'm just going to go in and paint that black. I want no influence from the neck at all. So the only way to paint true black all the time is to set paint operation to replace, use a brush with no fall off, and you want to set opacity is just like opacity in Photoshop and every other thing. Value is what value you're trying to paint, or basically like the amount of influence. So 0 is no influence, 1 is lots of influence. And then scribble aggressively over your model like a crazy person. Ha 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 ha. That should pretty much remove all of the influence from that neck joint. And you'll notice, if I can get to my timeline, hooray, the top of the body is behaving a little bit better. You'll notice it is still bending though, and in that case, still not something I'm really looking for. So I'm going to go ahead and paint a value of pure white for the chest joint. And I'll just sort of paint that anywhere on this like upper piece of the model itself. Making sure to get all of the sides. You want to make sure you hit the undersides of this as well. Like literally anywhere you do not want to bend, you should paint in pure white. And it does help to sort of have these keyframes, because in this case I can just move over and be like, couldn't reach it. I'm just going to scrub through my timeline and then go through and, again, paint that white. So you can see now the chest is actually behaving as a solid piece of geometry, which is what we want. The other thing that I just sort of like very, very briefly want to touch on, so you can, I guess for the sake of argument, I'm going to do replace with a soft brush, set my value to 0. So you'll notice like the first place we hit with this, same settings, only thing I changed was the brush profile and painting 0 instead of white. We got one area of black, but it's not, you'll notice like you have to go over the same area like a bajillion times to maybe get black at some point. But if you switch to this hard profile, anywhere you touch, it pretty much is black immediately. So again, that's just like something to be aware of. If you want to paint values of pure influence, it needs to be this hard profile brush with the replace tool. Other tool that works pretty nicely, sometimes for like smoothing values out, is this smooth brush. profile I find doesn't matter as much for this one. Basically what this is going to do is you can just sort of like paint over your model, and it's going to kind of average the weight values for wherever you're drawing. So you notice, like, instead of being pure black as it was before, it's sort of normalizing that out to less and less influence. So it can be a good way, like if you have, you know, a bend that's a little bit rough or something like that, you can come in and hit it with a smooth brush and take that value down. So it's like a little bit of a smoother bend. Honestly, it's easier to sort of like play with the brushes a bit and sort of like figure out what you're doing and how you like working. But mostly I usually just do use smooth and replace. And for the most part, it actually seems like Maya's done a really nice job on this little curvy bit in here, so I'm not really going to touch the weights on that. I will scrub through and sort of show you what they look like. And in this case, so we've done stuff to the top of the body here, but the bottom is still kind of gross and bendy. I'll show you a different way to edit that, which is usually what I do for things like fingers, or anywhere that you know you want areas of sort of solid value, or just like it's easy to make blanket changes like this, or if areas that are like hard to reach. So what I'm going to do is go through and just I'm going to go through and select all of the vertices in the lower part of this body, and I just sort of was lazy, marquee selected, and I'm now just deselecting the vertices that I do not want. And I will go into Windows General Editors, Component Editor, and go into the Smooth Skin tab. You might need to scroll over to find it. It usually opens kind of off screen. But what this is basically a list of all of the vertices you currently have selected. Presently it's a lot of them, as well as all of the joints that are influencing those particular verts. So you'll see that, like, you know, spine 2 and spine 3 have some influence on this. What you can do is just make really sweeping blanket changes. Like I can just go in and be like, value of 1, boom. And that should pretty much get rid of any influence except spine 1. And, ooh, when you accidentally have a random vertice selected. But you can see the bottom of the body is like staying put, which is, in this case, what I was actually looking for. It occurs to me it probably would have made sense to paint that on the pelvis, but later problems. So if we go back into our skin weights tool, you can see that, again, this is now all white for spine 1. And in this case, I have done this dumb thing where I've like left this here accidentally. So this is usually somewhere I'd come in with my smooth brush, perhaps a smaller brush size, and come in and be like, oops, that was a dumb thing that I have done. Let me undo that. And you should see, hopefully, that this will bend a little bit nicer and not have those like crazy areas sort of sticking out. So that is basically smooth skin binding. Whether you want to work in the component editor or the paint skin weights tool is largely up to you. I do find the component editor is really, really helpful if you've ever done smooth skin binding on like a leg and you move the left leg and it takes the part of the right leg with it. It's super easy to just go in and select all the vertices on the right part of the leg and just be like, anywhere that there's, you know, influence from the left leg, you just set that influence to 0 and it'll snap the leg back and sort of like auto correct the weights on that. So it's really helpful for sort of sweeping changes like that across multiple joints, deleting lots of influences at once, or in the case of fingers, you can set like really nice sort of bends. But that is honestly like the basics of smooth skin binding. Probably all you would usually need to do for a robot is set up some kind of weird little cable like this.